The first thing Maria noticed that morning was how normal everything felt. Still wrapped in the kind of sleepy quiet that made her cul-de-sac feel safe, dependable, predictable. Sprinklers hissed in unison across a row of manicured lawns. And a dog barked 2 streets over, faint and far enough away that it blended into the rhythm of the morning. She balanced a cardboard coffee cup in one hand and her laptop bag in the other, her car keys jingling faintly in her jacket pocket. She stepped out of her car and let the door slam shut with a satisfying thud, breathing in the cool air. For a moment she paused, enjoying the calm before another day of endless video calls and emails. Another day, another Zoom marathon, she muttered under her breath, smiling faintly at the predictability of her routine. Her house looked just as it always did. Peach-colored siding, neat flower beds, the small flag she'd forgotten to take down since Labor Day. Nothing was out of place. She walked briskly up the driveway, shifted the coffee to her left hand, and dug for her house key. She was already mentally cataloging her tasks for the day: presentation at 9, client check in at 11, maybe a walk with the dog at lunch if she could tear herself away from her desk. The key slid into the lock. She gave the usual twist. It resisted. Maria frowned. She tried again, wiggling the key. The lock refused to budge. She pulled it out, inspected it briefly, then tried again with more force. The key ground against them, making a sickening metallic scrape. She twisted harder. Something snapped. She stared in disbelief at the jagged stump of her house key in her hand. For a long moment she just stood there, her mind trying to bridge the gap between what she expected. That the door would open, that she'd step inside, put her coffee on the counter, start her day. And what had actually happened. "What the?" she whispered, clutching the broken key. She knocked on the door with the side of her fist, half expecting her teenage daughter to come stumbling out, annoyed at the noise. Nothing. Silence. Her stomach tightened. She crouched down and examined the lock more closely. That was when she saw a fresh gleam of silver, cleaner than the weather-worn brass of her doorknob. The lock wasn't hers. A sticker had been slapped neatly across the doorframe, just above eye level. Bold, blocky text stared back at her: proper West security par HOA order. Maria blinked. "Read it again, then again." "Secured," she said aloud, her voice rising. "This is my house." The words tasted sour in her mouth. She rattled the knob violently, as if force might undo the absurdity. She kicked the door, once hard enough to make her coffee slosh over the lid and stain her sleeve. Across the street, a screen door creaked open. Mr. Patel shuffled onto his porch in a plaid robe, a mug of coffee steaming in his hand. His hair stuck up wildly, like he hadn't slept. "They too," he called out, his voice gravelly. Maria spun toward him. "What do you mean too?" "They changed mine at 3 in the morning," he said, shaking his head slowly. "Some guy in a van, quiet as a cat that was a break-in at first. But nope. Just the HO. You're joking," Maria said flatly. "Do I look like I'm joking?" He held up his mug as if it proved his point. "My kids are still inside. I had to bang on the back door until they opened it. Now I can't get out unless they let me." Maria's stomach dropped. She turned back to her own door, pressing her forehead against the glass panel. The house was dark. No sound. Her daughter should have been asleep upstairs. Her dog should have been. The house felt empty. "What is happening?" she muttered. A creak to her left drew her attention. Another neighbor, Mrs. Tran, emerged from her side yard, rattling her doorknob with the same bewildered look on her face. Her gardening gloves were still on, dirt smeared across the fingers. "Mine's changed too," she shouted, waving frantically. "What is this? Is it some kind of mistake?" Maria felt a rush of adrenaline. She walked halfway down her driveway, scanning the open residents, stepped out one by one, like actors emerging on cue. Each of them held a keyring, each rattled a doorknob, each discovered the same gleaming lock and the same sticker. The quiet cul-de-sac, so perfectly still only minutes before, filled with voices that climbed higher and sharper with every second. "They can't do this," someone yelled. "My husband's still asleep inside. They didn't even notify us." Mr. Patel set his mug down on the porch rail and strode toward Maria. His robe flapped in the breeze, his face red with frustration. "It's all of us," he said. "Every single one." Maria shook her head. "That's insane. They don't have the right. They can't just." "Apparently they think they can," he interrupted. "You see that sticker? It's official. Or at least, they want it to look official." The voices swelled. The cul-de-sac buzzed with panic, disbelief, and anger, the hum that belonged more to riots than sleepy suburban mornings. Maria's phone vibrated in her bag, but she ignored it. She couldn't look away from the sight of her own front door. So familiar, yet suddenly unreachable. Her sanctuary had been sealed overnight, without warning, without explanation. She felt like an intruder on her own lawn. A cold thought slithered into her mind. If they could change the locks without notice, what else could they do? She tightened her grip on the broken key, its jagged edge pressing into her palm until it hurt. The neighbors' voices rose higher, overlapping in a wave of outrage. But beneath it all was something quieter, heavier. Fear. Maria's eyes scanned the crowd, landing on each face in turn. She saw her own fear mirrored back in every pair of eyes. And for the first time since she'd moved into the neighborhood, she felt less like a homeowner and more like a prisoner waiting for the rules to be read. The clubhouse smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and stale coffee, the kind of scent that always clung to spaces designed for order rather than comfort. Folding chairs had been crammed into the long, low-ceilinged room in tight rows, every seat filled, with latecomers pressed against the back wall or standing in the doorways. The air was thick, restless, vibrating with whispers and muttered curses. People clutched broken keys, snapped photos of the stickers on their phones, or waved violation notices like evidence at a trial that hadn't yet begun. At the front of the room stood a folding table draped in a neat navy cloth. Behind it, perched on a chair with perfect posture, was Linda, the president of the HOA. Early 60s, hair immaculately coiffed, she wore a pale suit that looked as if it had come straight from a dry cleaner's hanger. Her expression was serene, almost smug, the faintest smile fixed at the corners of her mouth. 2 security guards flanked the stage, their arms crossed, their expressions unreadable. A microphone to life in Linda's hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, please," she said, her voice amplified, smooth, carrying over the rising tide of chatter. "Let's have some order." The board acted only in the community's best interest. The words dropped into the room like stones. Someone shouted from the middle rows, "Best interest. You locked us out of our homes." Another voice, sharper, "My grandmother was inside all day without food or her medication." The crowd roared its agreement, a wave of angry voices crashing against the calm, unyielding figure at the table. The guards tensed, scanning the residents. Linda lifted her hand as if she were swatting at gnats. "Please. Please." I understood high but long compliance with our bylaws had reached unacceptable levels. Action was necessary. Changing the locks what? Someone interrupted. "That's what it was." "It's trespassing," shouted another. The noise swelled again. Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood, gesturing, demanding explanations. The microphone squealed as Linda leaned closer, raising her voice for the first time. Changing the locks was a measure taken for community protection. She declared, "Here have been too many violations. Unauthorized paint colors, unapproved renovations, late fees ignored, and yes, unkempt lawns that reduce property values for all of us. We warned you, we sent notices." And yet, Maria was on her feet before she realized it. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She shoved her way through her row. The broken stump of her house key clutched tightly in her fist. The crowd seemed to hush as she stepped into the aisle, the spotlight of tension shifting toward her. "Notices," she said, her voice ringing out, cutting through the clamor. "You think an email buried in spam justifies this?" She held the broken key aloft, the jagged the fluorescent light. "This isn't community protection. This is kidnapping. This is intimidation. You've taken away our homes." The words hung in the air. A ripple went through the crowd. Cheers, claps, murmurs of agreement. People leaned forward, eyes fixed on Maria. Linda's smile faltered, just for a heartbeat, but she quickly composed herself. "With respect, Mrs. Alvarez, you signed the agreement when you moved here. You all did. Every single homeowner consented to the bylaws. The right to secure properties in cases of non-compliance is written clearly. Page 342. The member sounded ridiculous in Maria's ears. Page 342. She repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Who reads that far? No normal person thinks they're signing away the right to their own front door. Whether you read it or not is irrelevant," Linda replied coldly. "Ignorance of the rules does not excuse violation of them. The board has full authority, and we exercised it." The room erupted again. Residents surged to their feet, shouting over one another. "You can't get away with this. We'll sue." "You're not the law." Maria took a step closer to the front, the broken key still in her hand like a weapon. Her voice rose above the chaos, steady and unyielding. "This is not authority. This is abuse. You can quote page numbers all you like, but we know what this is: power for its own sake." For the first time, Linda's composure cracked. A muscle twitched in her jaw. She leaned forward, gripping the microphone with both hands. "If you don't like the bylaws, you are free to move. No one is forcing you to live here." The sentence landed like a slap. People gasped. Some booed. The idea that they could simply abandon their homes, their biggest investuaries, was so outrageous it bordered on obscene. Maria laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Move. After you've stolen our keys. After you've made our homes into prisons." "No, Linda. Tonight, the bylaws change." She slammed the broken key onto the table, the metallic clang echoing through the room. Applause burst forth, wild and unrestrained, spreading from one side of the clubhouse to the other. Residents stomped their feet, clapped their hands, raised their voices. The guards shifted uneasily. Linda sat rigid, her smile completely gone now, replaced with a pinched tightness around her mouth. She glanced at her fellow board members seated beside her. Men and women who avoided her eyes, who looked suddenly small and uncertain in their folding chairs. Maria turned back to the crowd. We've let this board push us around because we thought the rules mattered more than we did. But this proves otherwise. They don't care about rules. They care about control. And I say no more. Yes, someone shouted. Take back the neighborhood, cried another. A chant began at the back of the room, low and rough at first, then swelling as more voices joined in. No more locks. No more locks. Linda gripped the microphone, her knuckles white. You're making a mistake, she hissed, her voice nearly drowned by the chant. Without order, there is chaos. Without rules, this community will collapse. But the residents weren't listening anymore. The chant thundered through the clubhouse, shaking the flimsy walls, vibrating through the cheap tile floor. No more locks, no more locks. Maria felt the sound in her chest, a surge of unity she hadn't realized her neighbors were capable of. For the first time since she'd stood on her porch that morning, rattling her locked door in disbelief, she felt something like hope. Linda's eyes flicked to the security guards, searching for support. But even they looked uneasy now. Their arms no longer crossed, their gaze shifting toward the chanting crowd. They were outnumbered, hopelessly so. Maria leaned closer to the table, her voice steady and clear, meant for Linda alone. You're not afraid of chaos, she said softly. You're afraid of losing control. And tonight you just did. The applause roared louder, shaking the very air. For a split second, Linda looked small, almost fragile. Her immaculate suit and polished hair a flimsy shield against the fury of 100 people who'd finally realized they outnumbered her. Maria straightened, turned to face her neighbors, and raised her fist with the broken key clenched tight. The roar that answered was deafening, unstoppable. Linda sat frozen at the table, trapped in the very order she had created.